Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to News Dose, and this should be a pretty big week for the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition. Of course, we've been through this journey together since day one. Hopefully it's been an informative ride, but we are finally expected to get the CMA decision, first domino, in what could possibly be the first time, though the FTC still has yet to yield. They are fighting this buyout with every single scrap of information that they can get their hands on, and apparently that now includes Nintendo. The FTC is seeking some information from Nintendo specifically, so yeah, we're going to get into that today and this one is sounding massive. As always, though, do hit those buttons below. It helps the channel a ton, but, you know, it is Monday, so let's just go and start the week off with our first topic being about Lawbreakers. Yeah, we did talk about this last week and how Cliff Bleszinski did allude to the idea of his previously shut down game. Lawyers were kind of looking into who owns the IP. Well, Cliffy B has since given us another update which states, well, turns out Nexon does own the rights to Lawbreakers. At Owen Mahoney, how about him specifically? I mean, sure, he's going to have some input. The question really just becomes, is there a chance Lawbreakers could have success 5 years after it was originally shut down? To that, I could see how this, not like they're necessarily starting from scratch. And now, after a period of time, Lawbreakers might actually have a better opportunity. Software's next game. I mean, after Elden Ring, I feel like I'll have to wait all that long to find out for ourselves. This is coming from... Now, that shouldn't really come as a major surprise, considering a Korean rating for Armored Core. Talk about this in a previous video, and as I mentioned then, more often than not, a soonish reveal usually seems to come soon after those ratings start to emerge. However, I think what's kind of interesting about this specific leak is thought it would get its big reveal. I think that makes sense. From Software did previously team up with Jeff Keighley to reveal Elden Ring at the Summer Game Fest, so I thought maybe they try to do the same thing with Armored Core 6. Obviously, that game had a lot of success, but according to Tom Henderson's source, not necessarily 100%. That does kind of take us into our next topic, though, because if they don't reveal Armored Core 6 at the Summer Game Fest, there's also a pretty heavy rumor that continues to pick up a lot of steam, and that's a major PlayStation showcase this May. Now, wrong last week, but he has shown multiple times in the past that he is a reliable insider, and on his podcast, he claimed that the Sony showcase will happen before the Summer Game Fest. He noted that it was probably safely going to happen in May, but it could also happen in very early June. So to be safe, he's simply saying it will happen before the Summer Game Fest. The thing about this showcase, though, is that from everything that we've been hearing, this sounds like a massive event. It was previously described as being Sony's showcase to set up the second half of their generation, phase 2 of the PlayStation 5, which that would mean that there's a good chance that they're going to lift the curtain as to what several of their studios are working on. I mean, there for a long time, we knew about God of War Ragnarok, we knew about Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, and Spider-Man 2, even X-Men, but now we need to kind of see what's next. And, well, it sounds like they're about ready to divulge that information to fans here sometime soon. Now, we'll come back to that here in just a moment, but, you know, this isn't just going to be for first party. There is that potential for third-party announcements as well. And one thing that we do know is that Sony and From Software, well, they have a great relationship. Of course, they exclusively worked together last generation on Bloodborne. Please, Sony, let's get a 60 frames PlayStation 5 patch for that game, please. But more so, Sony also acquired a minority stake in From Software's parent company just last year. They do own about 14% of Catacomb Caldwell. So, I mean, it would make perfect sense to reveal Armored Core 6's gameplay with a release date at their showcase. This is their next big game, and really their first big non-Souls game in quite a long time. This not only would put a lot of eyes on Armored Core 6, which has been relatively niche in the past, but with Sony's presence, there's going to be a lot of people that tunes into this event, so I mean, this would be a great place to show its gameplay. But I think it's also a good move for PlayStation as well, following the success of Elden Ring. Again, I do feel like there's more anticipation for Armored Core 6 than we've seen for this franchise in the past, just because, you know, this is their next game after Elden Ring. Now, another big third-party game that could be revealed here, though, is Mortal Kombat 12. This is another game that we've talked about a few different times in the past. At a previous financial call, the Warner Brothers CEO practically confirmed that Mortal Kombat 12 will release this year. So, I mean, now we're just kind of waiting for a more official reveal, I guess you can say. And according to Nick Baker, as well as Jez Corden, its announcement might happen this May, with Nick specifically pointing at that PlayStation Showcase. So, I mean, those two games alone, I'd already say makes this showcase interesting. It's definitely worth tuning in just for those two games. But, I mean, just based on the hype that's surrounding this event, it does sound like that this could possibly just be the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's so many other third-party games that could possibly appear here, including Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. I feel like by this point we've kind of seen enough of Final Fantasy 16. Yes, they're kind of alluding that they're going to show even more, but truthfully, I feel like they've shown enough. But however, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth marketing will likely ramp up soon as well. Whether or not they do that before the release of Final Fantasy 16 or after, I am kind of curious about that. But considering they even announced Rebirth before 16. Who knows? They could start to ramp up that marketing soon, and what better place to do that than at the PlayStation Showcase? Now, as for Sony's first-party lineup, though, that's the one that really gets fans excited. And one thing about Sony this generation is that they've been very tight-lipped about their first-party studios. I feel like that there's just so much unknown about what they're doing, and that's the thing, because I feel like most gamers have been satisfied with the PlayStation 5 thus far. I think Sony's done a good job with their first-party lineup, but at the same time, there's just still so many games that could potentially be revealed soon. And I mean, if you look at PlayStation's history, it does feel like it's the latter part of their generation. It's that back half that tends to be a little bit more loaded, and I feel like that's what's going to happen here with the PlayStation 5 as well. But, I mean, just kind of looking through Sony's PlayStation Studios, as an example, we don't know what Bluepoint Games is working on. They released the Demon's Souls remake back in 2020, and we haven't heard about them since. Now, it did seem like they were maybe teasing something during the holidays, so again, maybe they're preparing for an announcement sometime here soon. Sony Bend, the studio behind Days Gone, they haven't released a game since 2019. Pixel Opus is another studio that hasn't released a game since 2019 in Concrete Genie. They have Asobi, the studio behind Astro's Playroom. That game released back in 2020. Sucker Punch, that's a big one. And they released Ghost of Tsushima in 2020 as well. Naughty Dog, and it's crazy to think, but they have multiple games in development, including Factions, which we know is coming sometime here soon, and then also a new single-player game. We also know that Sony has multiple live service games in development, such as the Horizon MMO. Haven Studios, they acquired them here recently. They are working on a multiplayer game, and then same with the recently acquired Firewalk. We still have yet to see either one of these games, and there's even rumors that Sony has a secret studio working alongside Naughty Dog on a possible new Uncharted title. Now, I'm not saying that all these studios will show something at this upcoming rumored event, but what I am saying here, these are all studios that could have something to release for that second phase of the PlayStation 5. I mean, several of these games could still be a little further out still, but one thing that we do know about Sony is that they're not afraid of announcing games that are a little further out. We saw that with God of War Ragnarok, we saw that with Spider-Man 2, and we also saw that with X-Men. So, yeah, if this rumored showcase really does happen in May, which, I mean, there's a lot of smoke here, and if it's as big as some people are making it out to be, then we could be in store for one of Sony's most hyped up events in recent memory. Now, we also got a we'll call it an interesting update regarding the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition, because the FTC continues to try and stop the buyout. This time, though, by, interestingly enough, using Nintendo. They are now attempting to subpoena Nintendo to apparently gain information on what the 10-year Call of Duty contract includes. We can actually see here, posted up by Tweaktown, it says, the FTC has subpoenaed Steve Singer, Nintendo of America's Vice President of Publisher and Developer Relations, to deliver up to 7 hours of testimony to the FTC's Complaint Council. Singer was the Nintendo executive who negotiated with Microsoft to iron out the 10-year Call of Duty licensing deal, which began all the way back in December 6, 2022, when the two companies signed a letter of intent regarding the deal. According to the filing, the FTC followed a specific process with this particular subpoena. Nintendo of America legal counsel alleges that the FTC did not order the subpoena until it learned that Singer was the Nintendo executive responsible for the negotiations with Microsoft. The FTC asked for the identity of Nintendo's negotiator on March 16th, and then served the subpoena on March 29th, 30th. Both the identity request and the subpoena serving were made after the case's subpoena deadline on March 3rd. So basically, Nintendo, they're fighting against showing up in this case. As many of us are painfully aware of, Nintendo is a very, very secretive company, and being in a case like this where somebody's questioned for 7 hours, I mean, that's a very long time. So that's a recipe for unannounced information to make its way to the public, and Nintendo, they know this. Now, I imagine most of this information would be redacted if they actually had to testify, but if this 10-year contract alludes to, let's say, the Switch successor, as example, in any shape or form, I'm sure Nintendo doesn't want that out in the world. They want to announce this console on their own time. I mean, let's go ahead and say the Switch successor doesn't release until 2024. Well, they don't want that idea to be out there before this year's holiday. They want that Switch to continue to sell well. So again, they want to announce this console on their own time, and being asked for a 7 hours testimony could maybe possibly go against that. I mean, who knows what else could be revealed here, but that is one thing that fans want to know. How does Microsoft intend to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo? Does this include cloud streaming? Is this going to be a watered-down version graphically ported over the Switch? Are they going to port over the mobile edition that we see on phones and tablets? Or is a big part of that contract specifically geared for the Switch successor, which, I mean, I very much would expect to be the case. Nonetheless, though, I find this to be a strange request from the FTC. Now, the reason I say that is because this is the same people that basically shunned Nintendo as an Xbox and PlayStation competitor. You have to remember, their newfound definition is the quote-unquote high-end console market, which, you know, doesn't include Nintendo. Yet here, the FTC is trying to use Nintendo for their case. So, I don't know. The FTC is just all over the place. Regardless, though, the CMA's decision is looming later this week. By all indications, it does sound like the CMA will approve this buyout, and if they do, then the EU might be shortly thereafter, likely this May, and with two of the biggest regulators in support of Microsoft, this only puts more pressure onto the FTC to eventually cave from their very, weak case by this point. I mean, even the government is giving the FTC a hard time for how little sense they're making with this buyout by this point. We will, however, see soon enough, though, because within the next month or so, this buyout might mostly be complete, or enough so to go through without the FTC's decision. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, and I was kind of thinking about this the other day, but I wanted your all's perspective, so I went ahead and asked you all, if you had the option, would you rather Sony work on a PlayStation VR headset or a handheld console? And as you can see here, 75% of you did vote for a handheld, while only 15% of you voted for PlayStation VR. So yeah, it's crazy to think about this, but for as much as the PlayStation Vita failed, I still love that console, but for as much as it failed, it still sold about triple as much as the original PlayStation VR. So I was kind of thinking about that and how Sony just abandoned the PlayStation Vita as soon as it struggled. But we haven't really seen that with the PlayStation VR. The original PlayStation VR went on to sell 5 million units, which was deemed as a success, and then they made the PlayStation VR 2. Now, so far, it hasn't necessarily sold extraordinarily well, but Sony still seems to believe it can once again achieve 5 million units lifetime, and possibly even more. But with that, I do kind of wonder, why does Sony make VR headsets as opposed to handhelds when those have historically had much more success? Again, the Vita, yes, it struggled, but it sold around 15-16 million units, and then the PSP, with Sony's full support, I believe it sold around 80 million units worldwide. So I don't know, I just thought it was kind of an interesting comparison to think about. These are very different platforms, but in the past, both these platforms have taken Sony's first-party studios away from their home consoles as they support them separately. But even though VR isn't necessarily as popular as handhelds, or at least as of right now, Sony still, however, seems to favor that technology more. Maybe they're possibly banking on it being a big part of their future, even if it's not necessarily immediate. They just want to be a part of pioneering that VR technology. Now, to be fair, as far as handhelds are concerned, it sounds like Sony at least has a remote play handheld option coming soon. It's not quite the same as a Vita 2, but at least there's something, I guess, to look forward to. I do kind of wonder about that device. It's kind of grown on me over time, but I'd still much rather a dedicated handheld. If anything else, though, it definitely seems like there's still a large portion of the community that wants a legitimate handheld option from Sony, and it looks like more so than what they're offering with the PlayStation VR 2. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.